Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lauren Izo, and coming up in this edition, 1 year has passed since the assassination of a top Iranian general in Iraq. Now they're warning Israel and the U.S. that their finger is on the trigger. Just a couple weeks away from an administration shift, Israel delivers protection and peace of mind to its friends in Washington. And tourism in Israel hit a new low in 2020. We'll find out the country's plan for recovery. We begin today with some breaking news coming to us from the West Bank. In the last few hours, an Israeli woman was seriously injured in a stone-throwing incident, although she is now in stable condition. The 40-year-old woman sustained a head injury after what local officials are calling a terror attack when she was apparently on the way to get a COVID test. Police have opened an investigation into the incident. Of course, we will update you with any news on that story. Moving on now. 1 year has passed since the United States assassinated an Iranian general, Qasem Soleimani, in a drone strike in Iraq. Now, on the anniversary of the strike, his successor is vowing to retaliate against, quote, American mischief. Now, with the new administration about to enter the White House, Iran's foreign minister is giving a stern warning against any last-minute provocations or tricks by the United States or Israel, for that matter. More in the next report. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif urged U.S. President Donald Trump on Saturday not to be trapped by an alleged Israeli plan to provoke a war through attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq. In a tweet, he wrote, "New intelligence from Iraq indicates that Israeli agent provocateurs are plotting attacks against Americans, putting an outgoing Trump in a bind," adding that Trump should be, quote, careful of a trap. The warning was issued on the anniversary of the killing of top Iranian general Qasem Soleimani by a U.S. drone strike in Iraq. An Israeli official is dismissing the accusation as nonsense. According to Energy Minister Yuval Steinitz, it is Israel that needs to be on alert for possible Iranian strikes this week, the one-year anniversary of the assassination of Tehran's top general. Washington blames Iran-backed militia for regular rocket attacks on U.S. facilities in Iraq, including the U.S. Embassy. No known Iran-backed groups have claimed responsibility. The U.S. military flew 2 nuclear-capable B-52 bombers to the Middle East in a message of deterrence to Iran last week, but they have since left the region. The commander of Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard Corps, General Hussein Salami, vowed to strike back in the case of any attack on Iran. In Iraq, a vigil was held on Saturday to commemorate the death of Soleimani, as well as an Iraqi militia leader killed in the same drone attack.
إن إرادة هؤلاء الذين كانوا هم وقفوا بوجه الشيطان الأكبر ألا وهي أمريكا وإسرائيل وقد فشلوا هذا المخطط الكبير ألا وهو الاحتلال باعتبارهم الوطن العربي أو جزء من الوطن العربي ألا وهو العراقي وإيراني وسوريا وغيرها من بقية الدول، لكن نقول لهم أنهم قد وقفوا بوجه هؤلاء الطغيان الأكبر، فكون هو استهدافا شخصيا.
While Israel has not admitted to being involved in the assassination, it is widely believed to have been a joint operation with U.S. forces. Lauren Izo, ILTV. Meanwhile, Iran's nuclear program is as strong as ever, and the Islamic Republic is vowing to enrich its uranium up to 20% as soon as possible. That would make the country's nuclear program just a small technical step away from being able to make a bomb. Akbar Salehi is U.S. educated and the head of the Civilian Atomic Energy Organization of Iran. He told Iranian state television that their fingers are already, quote, on the trigger, and they will immediately shoot upon command. Trump famously exited the Obama-brokered Iran nuclear deal in 2018, which sought to keep their enrichment below 4%. Uranium enriched to 20% is far below the 90% needed to construct nuclear bombs, but the jump from 20% to 90% is actually rather quick compared to the work needed to move from 4% to 20%. It's unclear whether or not the Biden administration will push to re-enter the deal, but it is clear Tehran is looking to send a message to both the U.S. and Israel. Okay, let's welcome Efraim Inbar to the show. He's the president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Thank you so much for joining us.
Shalom to everybody.
So, do you think that Zarif's accusations are possible? Could the U.S. be tricked into an escalation with Iran by Israel?
I don't think Israel has any plans for such a thing. We definitely are not crazy enough to hit American targets in order to make them believe that it is the Iranians that have done so. I think the US has good intelligence and will be able to find out very quickly who is the actor that hit them.
Right, it totally does seem a little bit far-fetched. Also, today, as you know, is the anniversary of Soleimani's death. Does Israel need to be extra vigilant today? It seems like both Tehran, Washington, and Jerusalem are on edge.
I think we should definitely take seriously any threat of Iran. The Iranians are intent on destroying the Jewish state, and they are establishing a ring of fire around Israel. And we definitely have to be concerned about potential Iranian attacks against Israeli and Jewish targets.
Iran is also vowing to majorly enrich its uranium to up to 20%, and just a couple of weeks before a new White House administration. Wouldn't this hurt them more than help them if they do want to re-enter some sort of deal?
I think they want to emphasize their ability to further erode the JCPOA nuclear agreement in order to get a better bargaining position vis-a-vis the emerging Biden administration. After all, we know that the emerging Biden administration is intent on having renewed dialogue with Iran, but there is a disagreement within the specialists around Biden whether the United States should agree to roll back the sanctions that were imposed by the Trump administration or to accept the Iranian demand to start negotiating after removing all sanctions. And this, of course, will bring about a loss of American leverage in the negotiations.
Right, but wouldn't Iran's moves right now still be seen as counterproductive if at the end of the day the goal is to re-enter that deal?
I fully agree. I think that negotiations would hardly lead to a better agreement, as the Biden administration or some of the Biden administration people say. And we've seen already that even maximum pressure by the Trump administration for 2 years didn't bring any such result. And unfortunately, probably only the use of force will bring about the destruction of the nuclear Iranian infrastructure. So the international community is hesitant to use force, so they prefer negotiations.
Sure, we will, of course, be keeping a close eye on this situation. Thank you so much for your insight.
You're welcome.
Well, over the weekend, Israel delivered the second of 2 Iron Dome defense system batteries to the United States Army, part of an agreement signed by the Israeli Defense Ministry and the U.S. Department of Defense. The batteries produced by Israel defense firm Rafael Systems will be deployed against a variety of ballistic and aerial threats. Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz saying in a statement, the delivery of the Iron Dome to the U.S. Army demonstrates the close relations between the Israel Ministry of Defense and the U.S. Department of Defense, the effectiveness of the system against various threats, and the excellent capabilities of Israeli industries. For more on this story, you can visit our new and improved website at ILTV.tv and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for daily updates. Okay, speaking of that U.S.-Israel relationship, Vice President Mike Pence was expected to make one last trip to Israel this week, but he has canceled his trip. Pence was reportedly scheduled to make a number of stops on a final world tour before leaving office on January 20th. But a spokesperson for the U.S. Embassy in Israel confirmed it had been canceled. It has been revealed that Pence will be chairing a hearing on January 6th in Washington, where he may or may not be Trump's last chance to overturn the election result, although many remain skeptical of the legalities behind the theory. But still, some say Pence's canceled world tour could have been a chance for him to avoid the president, who still has not accepted his own election loss. Elections have clearly taken over the headlines in the United States in the last few months, but also in Israel, with the country set to hold its fourth election in less than 2 years. Prime Minister Netanyahu is currently embattled with corruption lawsuits, a large anti-government protest movement, as well as several of his most staunch supporters leaving his Likud party. Now he's trying to change his tactics. According to Israel's Channel 12, Netanyahu wants to break the, quote, veto of Israel's Arab parties on the country's Arab population, a flip turn in his usual campaign tactics. Now let's hear more about it from Yosef Haddad, an activist and the CEO of Together Vouch for Each Other. Thank you so much for joining us, Yosef.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, what percentage of the Arab-Israeli population normally votes for Netanyahu? Do you think that could change with the right campaigning?
First of all, we're talking about between 1.5% to 2%, which is around 10,000 votes that vote for the Likud without the Likud actually making and doing any campaign. But the issue is not whether the voters, the Arab voters voted for the Likud or for any right-wing party in Israel in the election. The question is all about the joint list. And the joint list failed big time. The joint list proved that it doesn't matter if you are with 10 seats, 13 seats, or 15 seats. They are in the opposition. They're not doing anything for our society. And unfortunately, we've seen this in the last year where our Arab society is going backward with no solution. What happened is that finally, we are seeing that Likud, Yamina, Gidon Sa'ar, a new political party, also Yair Lapid, and part of the left-wing parties in the Knesset are actually wanting to address the Arab voice. This is something that I welcome. This is something that we want to happen. And we are talking about, listen to this. According to the last polls, the joint list is about 11 seats, which means that the joint list lost almost or over 150,000 votes. Those votes are waiting for a political party to collect them. Now, since we don't have an Arab alternative, the alternative goes to the Jewish political parties. They must go for it.
Well, Yosef, Netanyahu famously warned his right-wing Likud supporters in previous elections that, quote, the Arabs were coming out in buses to vote, an intimidation tactic of sorts, to get more Likud supporters to come out. So this is quite a new voter demographic for him. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what happened is, back then, the campaign tactic of the Likud and Benjamin Netanyahu, it was obvious, and I spoke about it a lot in the last 2 years. Me, my organization, Together Vouch for Each Other, we tried as much as we can to urge everyone not to do a generalization, not to talk about the Arabs are running and going in buses to vote, but to talk about specific parties such as the joint list, not to come and say we will not sit down in a coalition with the Arabs, rather than to say we will not sit down with the joint list and the supporters such as Ahmed Tibi and Ayman Odeh. And I'm happy to see that finally, 2 years later, Likud and the rest of the political parties, the Jewish political parties, understood the way that should address the Arab votes. I think the most amazing thing is that the Arab Israeli wants to be an integral part of the Israeli society and wants to be the voice that influences our political life. And that's why all the political parties, especially in the Jewish part, addressing our voices. It is good. We need that to keep on coming. It is a campaign, but it is time for all of them to address us and to talk to us. We are here, and we want to affect.
Well, it will certainly be a fascinating election. Yosef Haddad, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Well, Israel is on its way to being the first country in the entire world to vaccinate its general population. Over the weekend, it vaccinated its 1 millionth citizen. Yes, that's right. And the Prime Minister was there to show his support and squeeze some votes for the upcoming election along the way, of course. Take a look.
Israel has vaccinated 1 million people against COVID-19, more than a tenth of its population. And Prime Minister Netanyahu was on hand to mark what he said was the millionth Israeli to receive a vaccine in the Arab town of al-Fahim.
מיליון למדינת ישראל, אנחנו שוברים את כל השיאים, הבאנו מיליוני חיסונים למדינת ישראל, הקדמנו את כל העולם, ועכשיו אנחנו מקדימים אותם עם קופות החולים המצוינות שלנו, אנחנו זזים קדימה במהירות עצומה כדי לחסן את כלל האוכלוסייה. חשוב לי שגם בציבור הערבי בישראל יתחסנו מהר.
According to the head of Israel's health ministry, the general population will be able to vaccinate in about a month.
אנחנו מכסים כרגע על פי מצאי החיסונים בארץ, על פי הגעתם ועל פי קבוצות תעדוף, באשר לאנשים צעירים ובריאים. הדבר הזה ייקח עוד זמן, ואני מעריך שנוכל בקצב ההגעה הנוכחי לחסן אנשים צעירים יותר ובריאים בחודש פברואר.
Israel has vaccinated more of its population than any other country in the world.
Israel today is a global leader. We are the fastest giving vaccination nation in the world. And this is another attempt of our city to expand even further the various possibilities to be vaccinated here in this country.
Famous Israeli illusionist Uri Geller got vaccinated as well, and even did a special magic trick while getting the shot.
I did it! It didn't hurt at all. It's a little prick, but it's very, very important.
Still, Israel's cases are not slowing down, with the daily infection rate surpassing 6,000 cases. The Prime Minister's office releasing a statement over the weekend calling for a tight, short lockdown, which would see all schools shut in the country, along with other measures. On Friday, the health ministry said that 6,004 new coronavirus cases were confirmed the previous day, along with 2,154 cases recorded since midnight of the 98,000 tests performed on Friday, 6.1% of which came back positive. Aaron Porras, ILTV.
If the infection rate is any indication, Israel's tourism industry is not yet in recovery mode. Instead, it's starting to really feel the losses of 2020, when the entire industry essentially came to a halt, not only in Israel, but all over the world. Many whose livelihood is built on tourism have suffered immensely, with little to no hope for recovery in the near future. According to Israel's tourism ministry, in the past year alone, around 850,000 tourists visited Israel, a drop of around 81% compared to 2019. And 200,000 employed in the tourism industry have completely lost their jobs. Let's speak to Yaron Ergas, the Director of Research and Statistics at the Tourism Ministry, about their plan for 2021. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
So, first of all, I'd first like to ask you if you could just go over some of the most shocking statistics that you found in this research, in this report.
Okay, so actually, it's what you said. We are experiencing not just incoming tourism decrease of approximately 80% in relation, I mean, if you compare it to 2019, but also a decrease in the domestic tourism. The increase in the incoming tourism is obvious, it's global, and domestic tourism is usually in crisis, is something that we can count on by recovering or helping to the tourism industry in Israel to recover. But in this crisis, it's different than other crises that we've been experiencing before. Also, the domestic tourism decreased by approximately 50%. And that means that if we had investments, or we had actually income from tourism of 36 billion shekels in 2019, we estimated the income from tourism in 2020 is decreased by 26 billion shekels less, meaning that we are probably going to finish this year with 10 billion Israeli shekels only, in comparison to 36 billion shekels. That's a major decrease, and it's, I think, incomparable to all other industries of the economy of Israel, and it's a very dramatic change. And of course, tourism is an optimistic field, and we are optimistic towards the future, especially with regard to what you've been reporting in the previous item about the vaccinations.
Absolutely, and I'm sure everybody around the entire world is really looking forward to traveling again. Yaron Argas, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Right-wing protests are becoming more and more violent in Jerusalem over the death of a 16-year-old Hilltop youth, Ahuvia Sandak. He was killed in a car crash during a police chase after allegedly throwing stones at innocent Palestinians last month. Footage from the demonstrations emerging over the weekend of an extremist mob throwing rocks and other objects towards a vehicle driven by Arabs, as well as attempting to open the car's door to attack them. The attack occurred around 3 a.m. on Friday morning, a number of hours after the initial protest was dispersed by police. Okay, for the first time since the founding of the State of Israel, the country's Jewish population dropped below 74%, according to Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics. The Bureau classified Israelis in one of three ways: Jewish, Arab, and other. The other category includes non-Arab Christians and those who do not identify with a particular religion classification. The Jewish population in the country decreased from 74.1% in 2019 to 73.9%, a drop of 0.2%. That drop is due to an increase in the Arab population as well as a sharp decrease in Jewish immigrants, or olim, this year. The number of Jewish immigrants hit a record low of 33.8% of the total number of new immigrants in the country. In case you haven't had your fill of tight shorts this year, Israel's professional cycling team is revealing their new uniforms for 2021. The team, known as Israel's Startup Nation, releasing a picture of the new digs featuring new member Chris Froome and Guy Sagiv, Israel's first rider to race a Grand Tour at the 2018 Giro d'Italia. Froome, a four-time Tour de France winner, officially joined the squad just on January 1st. He posted the new uniform on social media, captioning his Instagram post, "New beginnings, yalla," a common Israeli phrase in Arabic meaning let's go. All of us here at ILTV are wishing them bahatzlacha, or good luck, in their new season. All right, it was a strange weekend for some in Tel Aviv as locals spotted steam emanating from below ground, forcing the evacuation of several apartment buildings. Officials had initially feared it could have stemmed from a gas leak or dangerous underground chemicals of some sort. Officials seem to be baffled by the eerie smoke, and the source has yet to be determined. Tel Aviv's deputy mayor describing the incident on Twitter as a mystery, asking, "What can this be?" While the cause is still unknown, residents were allowed to return home on Saturday, and geologists who studied the site said there was no danger. Okay, it's time to take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be a high of 54 degrees Fahrenheit or 12 degrees Celsius, and tomorrow will be cloudy with highs of 71 degrees Fahrenheit or 22 degrees Celsius. And now, just before we say goodbye, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. If you don't recognize that, that is Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv's skyline covered in fog this morning. There were pictures all over social media. Everywhere I looked, people were just posting these beautiful pictures of Tel Aviv seemingly floating in heaven. Amazing. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.21 shekels to the American dollar and 2.5 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Then don't forget to visit the all-new and improved ILTV website at iltv.tv and let us know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates while you're there. I'm Lauren Izzo. Thanks for watching.